This is Creativity Drill with Dr. Don and Jonathan Rundman.
Hey everybody, this is Jonathan Rundman, your co-host on Creativity Drill, and this episode is really extraordinary. It's a moment in history. Our guests are Lost and Found, the band, George Baum and Michael Bridges. And for thousands of you who are fans of theirs, you will really enjoy this episode. And for those of you who've never heard them before, you are in for a treat because this is truly the definition of indie rock. This is truly the definition of being an underground sensation. And extra special, we caught them at the end of their very last tour. That's right. After 29 years on the road, making records and playing concerts, Lost and Found, the band, is retiring. And it's just a really important and interesting point in their lives, and we're very honored that they shared 90 minutes with us. So, oh man, this is a great episode, and we're very pleased to have George Baum and Michael Bridges of the band Lost and Found. Here we go. Okay, George, just do me a favor. Yeah, this our laptop is broken.
And it holds it up.
So it holds up the screen.
And it looks cool.
And this laptop is from 2004. So it's over 10 years old. But
Do you only use it for podcasts?
Yeah.
Or
and it can only hold one at a time. We're kind of lame. We're kind of lame here, but you know.
It's primitive.
We do what works.
There's something I had like that. I only used an old laptop for something. I can't remember what it was, but yeah. Storage is.
What's your watch? Is that stainless steel?
No, it's a Swatch.
It's a Swatch. Oh, it's great.
It's funny, I have a Fitbit, but it stopped syncing with my phone, so I was like, I just gotta go back analog, you know. I'm gonna get a sundial.
This is a sweet microphone.
Okay, so you guys are gonna have to snuggle over there.
Yeah, okay. So we just lean in and talk into the mic, right?
Yep. So when you want to say something, just like lean over your neighbor there.
Well,
if you see something,
that's true.
Say something.
Yeah, get him like 6 inches away. And the system is the show begins when the guest gets out of their car. So there's no work. The show is going right now. So we're glad you're here. And
okay.
I'm gonna have to do a little
lean over
multitasking because I'll lean over and talk to you on the mic, and then I'm gonna be making sure the computer's working.
Oh, it's because you only have 2 inputs.
That's true. We've only got 2 inputs.
I was thinking because we have mics, but that wouldn't help.
That's right.
Yeah.
Is the washing machine on?
No, it's my water for tea.
Oh, we're making tea.
You guys have your
and
hot
the
drink.
listeners, this would be the listeners' chance to brew up some tea for themselves, get themselves a beverage, and prepare for this episode of our podcast because it's a pretty rare podcast. It's the first time we've ever recorded a conversation in the daytime. We always
because
record
you're vampires.
That's right. And so it's cool to have a podcast at 1 in the afternoon, which is highly unusual. And then it's the first time we've ever had more than one guest at a time. It's always Dawn and myself, but with one guest. And so we're going to see if it works to have 2 guests simultaneously, and then you guys have to just share that microphone.
The pressure's on. We're like blazing new trails here. All right.
Lean in like the Everly Brothers.
or Sheryl Sandberg.
Or
Yeah.
the Jordanaires. That's what I was trying to think of. Right?
Okay.
Well, welcome, you guys. We're glad you could come over.
Thank you.
This is a poignant moment, I think, because you just played last night, and Dawn and I were there, and we got to go to the show. And so that's another weird thing about this particular episode is usually if we're talking to a performer, sometimes we haven't ever seen them perform, or if we had, it's been a long time.
How do you know they're performers?
Yeah.
Because
Careful website checking.
Yeah, we've had actors and actresses and stage people and TV actors and that sort of stuff on, and even other musicians, but rarely has it been like only hours since we saw you guys play. And the fact that it's one of the last times you're playing in a long-term touring life. You're retiring.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
With 7 more concerts.
That's amazing. It's 29 years of being on the road, and we're catching you at this moment of being nearly complete.
So far, we played approximately 5,993. 4,993. We have 7 to go.
Really?
Hit our goal.
Have you done
Did you actually count them up?
No.
Oh, you're just guessing.
Right.
Is that a pretty accurate guess, though?
I think it's probably between 4,000 and 5,000 concerts.
It's around there, yeah.
Wow.
So you've put in your 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
Just as the performing.
2 hours long, 2.5 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. So for every hour of concerting, how many other functions happen?
Isn't that a good question?
It takes 8 to 20 hours to get to the
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
You're
like
talking just travel.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, our lives are like the reverse of most people. So we spend like in a day maybe 8 hours commuting and an hour and a half working. You know, it's just reverse of everyone else. So mostly what we do is travel. We often say that the main part of our job is like driving a van and moving heavy equipment around. And then for an hour and a half a day, we get to have some fun. But the rest of it, it's like we're moving company.
Yeah, I think it's like B.B. King or somebody used to say, you know, they pay me to travel, and I play the music for fun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, because even like, you know, if we were popular enough to have our own Branson theater, we'd definitely do that.
Oh yeah, or
Well, of
you
course,
could have a Vegas residency.
Right, exactly.
Just stay
you
right there
would
with
want to
Celine
move to
Dion.
Branson, but yeah, Vegas.
If only there were a venue in Vegas that hold like 30 people. Maybe like
Pack it
15.
every night. Every night.
Yeah.
When every other show is full, there's still like 30 people looking for a show. They could come see us. Right?
It's only $5.
That's an interesting business model.
Yeah, we're working on it. You know, right?
So if you were going to be a travel writer, or if you were going to write about your travels, would you be more interested in writing about like the food or the like ranking hotels or just sort of meeting people in cities all around the country?
Well,
or like what facet of the travels do you think you sort of could write about?
Well, you know, over the years we have told people about our bicycle trip quite a lot, and that's one of the travel stories we tell. We don't often talk about our sort of recent travels, or you know, airplane to hotel. We talk about our bike trip a lot, though, because it's interesting to people. And every time we tell that story, all we really tell about is the people we met. So just based on that, you know, that just kind of happened, I suspect that the most interesting part of it to us has been the people. We rarely say, and then we rode our bicycles over this ridge, and revealed before us was a panoramic view of the Badlands. And it's true, we saw some beautiful stuff, but it's funny how over the last 20 years we never mentioned the stuff we saw, but we always talk about the people we met.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's interesting because I met you guys 10 years into your career. I think we met in 1996. Well, it was when we just got to Chicago, so I think it was 1996. And because you played in River Forest where we had moved. And I didn't know about the bike trip, but then as I got to know you, and even in your concerts that I've seen over the years, you talk about the bike trip all the time. And even though it was like one of the first things you ever did, and it was a long time ago, it seems like you almost still define yourselves 30 years later by that thing, that moment.
Right.
Why? What is so essential? I mean, obviously, it's amazing that anybody could ride a bike around the country and play music, but that's just one thing that happened at the very beginning.
Yeah, and I think the reason it's so formative in what we do all the rest of the time. So down to like the way we sing, it's more like yelling. And that comes out of the bike trip, playing for 25 people with no mics. You know, sometimes playing for an entire school with no mics.
So you're saying in your early shows, it was all acoustic, no PA.
Right. They roll in a piano, that we'd borrow a guitar, and, you know, sometimes they were functioning instruments, sometimes not.
Oh, and on the bike trip, you didn't have instruments.
Nothing.
But we had to sing over the acoustic piano every night.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, you know, just our ability to project our voices, not worry about what they sound like, but that they are heard. You know, like that.
One could have played softer, you know.
No way.
Have you read the David Byrne book, How Music Works?
No.
Came out a couple years ago. He's got this great analysis of music that develops in different cultures around the world. And the theory is that the environment that the musician is in ends up shaping the music itself. So, for example, if music from Africa, where people lived out in the bush in great fields under the open sky, they have lots of drums because they can the drums carry across the
heard.
field, and
Right.
and they don't get muddy. Sonically muddy in a big open space, which is why music from Europe in the Middle Ages doesn't have rocking drums because they're in a cathedral.
Right.
And if you try to play drums in a cathedral, it sounds horrible and you can't differentiate the rhythm.
Yeah.
And so that's why choral music developed, or like pipe organs and choral music and recorders and that sort of stuff comes
All
out of the
set for a
cathedral.
cathedral, right.
So it's like the architecture and the environment shapes the music, and then people just think the music is what it is, but it's actually caused, and that's what you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Well, a related thing to what you just said, though, there's a thing that we learned in seminary that they always went back to. It's this famous quote that the building always wins. So no matter what you want to do in worship, the building always wins.
When your
can't.
theology and your architecture are in conflict, architecture always wins.
Yes,
I've
that's
heard
correct.
that quote too.
Yep. So
Yeah, that's a really
So back to the bike trip. So our style of playing, like, I'm pounding the piano as hard as I can to be heard. He's playing the guitar as hard as he can, and we're both screaming. Like, that's our style.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, like, we kept playing that way, even though we didn't need to anymore, right? So you have microphones, we're still singing that way, and we're still playing that way.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that like got carried from the bike trip into the present. Mm-hmm. And similarly, what Michael said about people, like our emphasis, like we're so formed by being so surprised how wonderful people are and how generous and how faith-filled, and that was our incubator, and we brought that forward too. Like we always give people what you could think of as the benefit of the doubt. We see the best in people because that's kind of how we started.
Yeah, and so talking about the bicycle trip every night, I mean, there's two things. One is that it answers the essential question people always want to know: how did you guys get started?
Right.
And also they wonder, like, how did you guys end up like this? How did you develop this sound? And how did you end up without a bass player or a drummer or singers? How did you end up this way? And the answer to it is simple. It's the bike trip. That's how we started. But there's also a lot of like sort of metaphorical resonance to telling the story of the bicycle trip, that the things that happen, and so it's very self-propelled.
Yeah.
Right? And our 29-year career has been that way. It's been very self-propelled. Mm-hmm. The bicycle trip also relied on the people we met along the way. And that's how our career has been for 29 years. It relies upon the generosity of the people we meet along the way, not only to invite us to and host concerts, but also to run the show. The show is always audience-driven. Right. And that's the way it was. So we would go to a town, and we'd just be fascinated, like George says, to meet the people. We'd be like, "Are you kidding me? That's your job. That's what you do. This is where you live." And it's always interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to that person, like raising cattle is not interesting. To us, that's fascinating.
That's fascinating, exactly. And so by saying we got started by riding our bicycles from town to town and playing a concert every 80 miles for an entire year.
And did you book those all in advance, or are you booking them as you ride?
Half and half. A third of it was booked before we left, and as we traveled, we booked the rest.
Yeah.
Phone cards?
What's that?
Did you have phone cards? How did you?
Part of the way through the year, we got a phone card from like a benefactor. Would give us a phone card, but mostly it was just we'd get to a place. Can we use your phone?
Okay.
To make 30 calls.
30 long distance calls.
Yeah.
Did you have a record in that? Was the vinyl record out at that point?
Yeah, that's exactly what we had. And Michael's mother would ship some to various towns strategically.
Yeah.
But then the leftovers we would put in a box and bungee cord them to the back of my bike. And I just had vinyl on the back of my bike.
No cassettes.
No, this was not that
before
we had.
cassettes.
Cassettes existed then. But
Yeah,
we
didn't manufacture
I
them.
think
at
we
that point.
got cassettes about halfway through.
about halfway through.
Yeah,
That's
we got them in
Phoenix or
California.
something.
Yeah. And were normal Joe Schmo in the world still listening to records in 1980? When was this? 86?
Yeah, 86.
Yeah, so people bought vinyl. You could go to
question.
Target and buy vinyl in 86.
For sure, yeah. Cassettes
Because
were
cassettes
an
were huge,
innovation.
but vinyl was still happening.
You only used a cassette to record stuff off your vinyl.
Yeah, that's true. You'd buy a
Or the
blank
radio.
tape. Okay, wow, that's so interesting. So the people obviously were. It's interesting to hear how important that part of it was to you. And do you think that the network you built way back then on that bike trip is still the network tech, sort of, that you're still touring
within? The mechanism by which we built that network is still the mechanism.
Yeah, and some of the people are probably the same.
Some of the people are the same. I was thinking about that, like, how, just getting back to your initial question, It's like if a band consisted of siblings, let's say, a couple,
say someone named Partridge?
Yeah, Carpenter or something. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, like if it were siblings, every night the band would probably say, "Oh, by the way, we're brother and sister."
Yeah.
And we started when we were 10 years old singing for our relatives.
Yeah.
And people would say, that was 40 years ago when you sang for your relatives around the dining room table. Yet you talk about it every night.
Yeah.
And they would say, that explains how we came to be what we are.
Yeah, interesting. I heard this great quote from Joan Rivers that I think about all the time. She was on Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher back in the 90s.
Back when that existed.
Back when he was on ABC. And they were talking about romantic relationships. And Joan Rivers said that before anybody should be allowed to get married, they should be forced to go on a cross-country car trip together. I thought that was like really funny and really wise.
Good,
And it makes me think of like, for people who are being creative in a partnership or just being creative in general, man, to do serious long distance travel is one of the most formative, inspiring things you could do, I think. And I think about my own life. Man, travel has been a huge inspiration for creativity.
Well, and you write a lot of geographical songs.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, I had a whole phase where all I was doing was writing geography. For years, all I did was write geography songs. But still, even now, I think travel is huge. And if you could get with your creative partner, regardless of the creative medium you're in, I think if you could get with your creative partner and travel with them in the plane, in the car, seeing the sights of the world, I mean, it's a bonding thing, it's a challenging thing, it's a formative thing. And I don't know. So what advice could you give to creative people, not just musicians, but creative people in general, lessons from the bike trip that they could take into their own creative practice?
Well, we come back. Was it Arthur Ashe? Right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, use what you have. Do what you can. Use what you have. Start where you are. I mean, I have those in the wrong order, but that idea of like, you can't start somewhere you're not, right? And obviously, and so like to spend your time wishing you could be somewhere else is not going to get you started.
Right.
You start where you are.
Yeah.
And you can't use things that you wish you had. You use what you have. And you do what you can. So for us on the bike trip, the great example is we would borrow a guitar and a piano, or that's what they were called. The guitar could have 5 strings. The piano could have all busted keys and out of tune. Like, that's what we have. We can't, sit around and say, well, we can't play because we don't have a good piano. We use what we have, right? And same way with the guitar. And, we did what we could. Like, we couldn't sing like, someone with beautiful voices, but we did what we could. So essentially at that, like, don't spend your time wishing to be or have something that you are not or don't have. Like, it's just... everybody has some creativity in them, and it's a matter of letting it out. And the more you put fences around it and say you have to draw in the lines, or your song has to be able to be played on the radio, which I would think would be a downside, but instead you write the song that you write, you paint the painting you paint, and you work at getting better, obviously, but you don't spend all your time in lessons before you ever paint something.
And use what you have also means really use everything you have. Use what you have. So for instance, the sound's not working, the monitors are squealing back. Oh, time to tell a joke. And so if one of us juggled we'd probably there always be a part of the show where we juggle. If one of us could jump rope to I could jump rope while George plays the ragtime piano. That'd probably be part of the show. We'd use what we have. So we'd be on the bike trip and they'd say, "Oh, you guys, I'm glad you came. We're going to put you guys in front of the preschool." Awesome. Great. Okay, we'll roll with that. Next town we get to, they go, "Okay, you guys, I booked you guys in the senior citizens."
We're going to the nursing home now.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can roll. Okay, what a friend we have in G. Like we just use what we had. Do what we can.
Well, and that's also trial by fire, which I think is a great thing that happens to especially performers. And the bike trip is a good example. And being on tour in general, I think any band who goes on tour, they're going to encounter the moments that are beyond their control. That doesn't happen if you're just playing in town. And that is you don't have drums, or the drums get stolen, or the PA system is horrible, or the gig gets canceled, or nobody comes, or you get thrown in front of the nursing home, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so you have to be on your toes, and you have to, in that moment, solve a problem immediately in the moment.
Yeah.
And that is it's difficult and challenging, but if you get forced to do those things, you get better, right?
Yes, for sure.
And that's also an exercise in creativity of how do you
solve that
this
problem?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, even like, when we drive somewhere in our van, we have all our own sound equipment. So like we are want for nothing, electronically, and all that stuff. It's in the van. When we fly, I take this smaller version of stuff, and it's like there are some things I bring and some I don't, and I can always figure out a way, like through various connections of chords to like make it work. I mean, it's never not worked.
Yeah.
But I don't go into it saying it will work because I have the expertise. By now I've come to rely on the fact that it's going to work because, with creative skills and things in front of me, MacGyver style, this is going to happen. And, right. So it's not, I don't worry about it. Not that I don't have to do anything about it, but I know it's fixable.
Yeah.
Right.
And you have got your experience and enough time behind you to realize that I know that whatever comes along, you can find a way through it.
Definitely. If it comes down to it, you go down to Guitar Center and you rent a sound system. I mean, sometimes that's the fix, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm interested in the creative process that you have used over the years to write songs, whether you write them together, whether you write them sort of separately and say, hey, I've got some good lyrics or something melodically, and if that's changed over 3 decades, or just sort of what the journey has been of you as songwriters.
I think the answer is yes. Right. Yeah.
That was probably too many questions smashed in there. Talk about your process, and maybe you have some different ones. Maybe sometimes it all comes out, and sometimes you work on something for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, there's always this notion, almost like a poet or someone would be like driven by a muse, and things would just occur. Things would just happen, right? And to a certain extent, I feel like our creative process begins with a spark that may be inspired by some type of muse, but ultimately creating a song is more of a craft. It's actually it's workmanship. We have to work on it. It doesn't just spew out. So when we were teenagers, of course, we didn't care that much about the craft. So stuff would just spew out and be like, man, I wrote that song in 2 minutes.
Now we look back and we say, it's talent.
But it's a craft. I mean, it might begin with a certain amount of creativity, but it's using your tools.
And it's bringing everything to it, right? Like, you read a book, you learn new words. Now you've got more, ammunition in your arsenal.
Tools.
Right?
Yeah.
I went right to war. Do you hear that?
Yeah.
War imagery right away. Here's something I was thinking about when I was watching you play yesterday. Well, first of all, the concert was really fun, and I was surprised, I guess, because I don't get to see you play concerts very much. I see you at an event or a festival where you're up for 3 songs and then down. And so rarely do I see an hour and a half of a concert like yesterday. But I thought you really hit almost every phase of your entire career in that concert last night.
Oh,
don't you think?
The set list, you mean?
Yeah, in the set list.
Yeah.
So you did really old songs, and then new songs from the brand new We Are With You record, and then a little bit from every space in between. And some of those were the songs you picked, and some of those were requests from the audience. But even the requests were across the gamut of your whole catalog. So I thought that was sort of interesting. And then I wanted to ask about the subject matter of the songs, because it seems to me, I got into the Lost and Found discography and experience quite late, like I said, in 1996. So you'd already been out there for a long time. And so there's a whole bunch of your songs that were had written before I ever saw you play, and it seemed like some of those older songs were more like fictional, character-driven songs. And you played Alexander last night, and you played the Grandma song, which I'd never heard, and they were more like high concept. You know what I mean? And it seems like in recent records, there's not as many conceptual tunes. They're a little bit more concrete. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, but I would also say, like, back in the earliest days, how can I put this? So when you're younger, maybe you don't have the experiences, or you're not willing to say that it's about me, kind of thing. And so you create this other thing that you can put it all in. So it's like an imaginary friend, right? So you say, here's a character named Alexander, and I can say all this stuff about him, and then set him over here, and he's gone, and I'm still living my life, And I think now, I wouldn't say this is a direct thing, but I think now we're more apt to write songs where we say exactly what we want to say, in the words we want to say them, carefully crafted to make a point.
Wow,
right?
That's a change.
I would think
you've changed.
Definitely, most certainly, right? Yeah, and I think part of it is like we're more careful what we say now. I mean, like, I read this thing not long ago when I was trying to figure out where this phrase "don't trust anybody over 30" comes from, and I was reading back there, but a side thing I got stuck in, a rabbit hole, was that musicians write all their best songs before 30. Yeah, and you can look across the board, all the famous bands. Mm-hmm. All their hits were written before 30. And then they keep cranking stuff out, never another hit. Mm-hmm. I mean, for the most part, right? Yeah. And so what I think that comes from is people get more careful. Like they're more like second guess themselves. When you're young and exuberant, you just say stuff. Yeah. You get older, you're like, I would never write that now. Yeah. But you've already written. So it's out there, right? It's out there. I mean, classic case is the Violent Femmes. I mean, like Gordon Gano would never have written any of those songs now. Right. But that album, like, they have to play everything from that album because it's a big album. Yeah. So in a similar way, when we don't write songs very much anymore, I think, because first of all, we have this huge catalog of over 160 songs. Like, we don't need more songs. And the other thing is, like, we're both so careful to say exactly what we want to say with the best words we can, and it's like a song takes a lot longer usually because we don't want to like say the wrong thing, not in a we're afraid of repercussions, but more like we want it to be the best song we can have. Right.
So we find ourselves like writing a lyric and then thinking, well, not necessarily.
Not really.
Right. Whereas it used to be always we just find something that rhymed, and then 5 years later, we'd say, "Oh, you know what this could mean?" And we'd find meaning in our songs later that we hadn't intended. Sure. Or other people would bring to us. They'd say, "Here's what this song means." We'd say, "Good one." Nice. But now we craft them more. We think in advance about what we want them to say.
Yeah, that exact thing is happening to me, and I guess for the first part of my career, I felt like I claimed all the songs I had written, even back to the earliest ones, and treated them all equally in my mind. And now at this stage in my life, I realize that, I don't know if I could play that one anymore. I don't think I could stand behind certain ones, like at the mic in a concert and deliver it. And that's weird. I didn't think that was going to happen to me, and now it has happened to me. And that's strange.
It's particularly bad for us because, our whole thing is that we're in sort of like this subset of music, the religious music sphere, right? Yeah. And so that comes with a certain understanding of theology. Yeah. And when we look back at our understanding of theology at 15 and compared to now at 52, we don't believe those same things. Right. And so these songs are out there. Yeah. And, thankfully, no one ever requests most of them. Right. But even that song, Alexander, like, it's a bit like, we're yelling at you. Like, you bad people, don't share it with your neighbors. But Michael wrote that song when he was like 17, maybe, right? And, when you're 17, that's a great song. Yeah. And a 17-year-old will, request, and other people too. But, like, we would not write a song like that now. Right. Certainly not end it like that. Yeah. Like, you are bad people.
Yeah. Well, that's, I totally am getting to that point myself. It's strange because most, especially bands, let's just stick with that, most bands don't have the luxury of surviving long enough to look in retrospect at their career.
Especially drummers.
No, it's very true. I mean, I think the other thing that happens, the other reason sometimes a band's best creative work is done early is because you get caught up in the business side, the commercial side of the work, and so you have a record, it's pretty successful, but those songs have been germinating for 25 years, and then you're 25 and you come out with your first record and it's awesome. It's your 12 best songs, and then the record company says, "We need another one. It's been 6 months. Come on." And really, all you have to sing about is a very narrow experience at that point. Unless, and once in a while, a band's second album is pretty good. I think because they had another 12 songs that they'd written before they were 25. But then at some point, when a band's experience is limited to the stuff that a band experiences, there just isn't that much to write about. And then the songs you can see how they become very similar. Like, here's a song about leaving my family. Here's a song about being on tour. Here's a song, it's it just becomes a little bit less.
Before you know it, you release Running on Empty.
Now, here's a question. Do you guys have a backlog of unreleased Lost and Found songs that never made it on an album, that no one's ever heard, and that are just lurking out there on a demo, on a cassette tape someplace?
There are a couple, but there's a reason why they weren't released. You know what I mean? It's not like we wrote a great song and we weren't recording an album, so it just sat over there. It's more like songs didn't make the cut. And there are songs where, I would sort of submit them for our approval, that I've written, and it'd be like, nah, it's not right. And then, by the time the next album comes out, we've refined that song, and now it's sort of like...
Or you could use it for parts for the future.
And we've done that, too.
We've done that. And, getting back to Don's question about the creative process and working with a partner, one thing I guess we've learned over the years is to give, first of all, to take your partner's input seriously, to give them space to think of something and to take it seriously. Because certainly, I think it's probably true for both of us, the reaction is say, "Oh, here's this song I've been working on. What do you think?" And then the other person goes in a direction you're thinking not what I was thinking. That's not the direction I was thinking. When you're writing a song by yourself, you have no one, you're not answerable to anyone.
Right.
So you just go in that direction, you roll with it. And what I've certainly learned over the years is that the things that I might think at first are not the direction. It's almost like I put a value judgment on it right away, and that's not, no.
Your editor comes into play.
Yeah, but then it turns out that's a great direction, and then we can't imagine the song not being in that direction now. And had we not had each other to bounce things off and work together with them, we'd have put out some stuff that, we wouldn't be singing 29 years later.
Right.
But we definitely, we have it's like having an editor or something. But it's also a matter of really taking it seriously. So in the editing world, when we have, once in a while we'll write songs for hire, and the editor will say, oh, no, change this word to this word. Change this to that. And in that case, it's a kind of relationship where we say, okay, and we change it.
That's a bad idea, but we'll do it.
Never really happy with it, but we roll with it. Whereas in the band, we say, well, that's not what I had in mind, or, maybe we should do this, or it'd be better if that word had one syllable, or, that whatever it is. And I think because we're a team, it works out better than it would if we were solo.
Yeah, and they always say that about Lennon and McCartney, that together they were much better songwriters than they were separately.
Sure. And boy, that's what I've learned at just in sort of music industry schmooze fests, and I went to the ASCAP conference, for example, in LA a few years ago, and went to all the panel discussions with all these super huge hit songwriters and producers.
And for our listeners who don't know what ASCAP means.
ASCAP is the performing rights organization for songwriters, one of them. And so it, helps songwriters with song placements and royalties and that sort of thing. So they had an industry conference. And I went to all these panel discussions for 4 days, and a few of the thesis statements agreed with one another between all these people. But the one thing that every single person agreed on, no matter who they were, what genre, what age group, whatever, is they said collaboration and co-writing is what you should be doing.
Wow.
And that was the only thing that everybody agreed on. And when I think about it, boy, my own journey in music has been a continuing upward ascent of collaboration, where I started doing everything alone, completely alone, and then gradually letting more and more people into the process until my most recent album is the most collaborative thing I've ever done, with the most co-writers and with a producer and with more exterior musicians, and I feel like, wow, it was also the most fulfilling, and I think has the most uniformly great songs, and so there's something about the editing process.
I think where we've had the most success is where one of us comes to the other and says, I got this chorus and one verse.
Yeah.
Let's write the other two verses. That's probably like our ideal sort of sweet spot songwriting thing.
Yeah.
Because now you've got like the structure in place. You know what the point is.
Yeah.
Now you're like working with words, which is the most fun part.
And we love to work with words.
Yeah. Right.
And probably some of my favorite songs for sure, are songs where we end up writing the song at a pad of paper, sitting at a table. We don't even have our instruments. We're just thinking, like, what are the words that would work?
Yeah. Oh, tell me about that. Like, what are the tools you're using? Are you pen on paper guys? Do you write on your laptop? Are you taking note? Are you singing into your iPhone? Like, what does it look like?
It definitely varies for me. When I've written the most songs in one chunk of time, it's taking a small like practice guitar, putting it in open tuning because I don't play guitar, and then just like doing bar chords up and down. And then just sitting here and say like, okay, now I got these chords, I got this melody. Here's a phrase that fits exactly into that as a chorus. You know, like the words, the syllables go in the right spot and everything. And then verses. That's when I like get up and get a pad of paper. And start writing stuff down.
Interesting. How about you, Michael?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, I'll often I like to wear my guitar around the house.
Oh yeah.
And which was easier before we had kids. Now it's harder. And I often think like if I continue writing music after the band is done, I will probably rent a space.
Oh yeah.
Just to go to.
Yeah.
And I like to wear my guitar around and come up with something. Oh, that sounds kind of cool. But it may or may not have any words. And then maybe come up with a little bit of a chorus, and then bring it to George the next weekend. Be like, we're in a sound check. Oh, I've been working on this chorus. And then we sit down, literally with pen and paper, or we're riding the van. So we have this song that's, I don't know how new it is, but a couple years old, where we use these words to kind of describe the nature of God being both large and small at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Within, without, or that.
Exactly.
What's that song called?
Here.
That's one of my favorites of your songs, and it's also one of your newest songs.
It's one of my favorites too.
Yeah.
It's funny too because Rachel was trying to request it last night, and I didn't see her hand because we had that thing about you have to come up and sing with us. That would have been so much fun. To be like, what's your song? And they get Rachel out there. But that's a song where there's really only so many words that fit.
Yeah.
It was like a puzzle.
Yeah.
And we had to think of words that would be the right word, so the description would be right.
Yeah.
But the actual usage of the word in language could work.
Yeah.
So, beyond.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah,
and then they get kind of tricky, like without. And, raises the whole, like, can God make a rock so big God can't push the rock or whatever.
Yeah.
But it all becomes this true sense of whatever you can think of that's big, God is bigger.
Yeah.
Whatever you can think of that's small, God is smaller. And God is here.
And, and the first verse is big and eminent. And the second verse is like closed in and imminent.
So you grouped the words.
Like if you look at the way they're
thematically.
grouped, right? Exactly. So the second verse is like against and inside and within. It's like smaller.
Yeah.
And the first one's like beyond and above.
Right.
Before.
Yeah, I do think that I love that song. That's one of my favorites of your songs. And I wonder, did you feel pressure once you had the idea and some of those double word scheme things? Did you feel pressure like now we have to make music that's as good as the text?
I think you had the
music. Or was the music already hanging out there?
Music was just so basic.
Yeah.
I mean, we really were so much more
beautiful music
focused
too.
On the words.
Yeah.
Which often happens to us.
Right. But the music is equally beautiful.
Yeah, and the other thing, the worst thing for us is to write songs like the week before we go in the studio. because like we don't have them worked out yet. You know, it's like you're like all the pieces are there,
Yeah.
but the speed of it's wrong. We don't yet have a piano solo. We wish we had this chord instead.
Oh, yeah.
So like playing it live in concert over 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's how that song's supposed to go.
So you'd rather road test all your tunes.
definitely. No question. Yeah.
If our career model had allowed for that, like
Yeah.
if we had a big label funding
Right.
us, that would be the ideal way to do it.
Yeah.
Get them out on the road. Here's how the song really is meant to go.
Yeah.
Now let's go in the studio, because then also you can record it in a day.
Sure, because you're warmed up and you know how to play it.
And the trouble for us has always been that we need songs to make a record, but when we go to play concerts, of course, people only want to hear the songs that they've already heard.
They already know.
People, by definition, they can't request a song that's new. Mm-hmm. So no one ever requests a new song.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So
And some people are predisposed to be. They've got a little bad feeling about new songs. Like they almost would rather. It makes them feel kind of anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we
definitely.
were influenced. We were almost influenced, and for a while, by people who would. Their criticism of Lost and Found would be, heard those songs, same songs.
Yeah.
Didn't you guys sing those songs last time you came here?
Uh-huh.
And it almost pushed us in the direction of, ooh, we have to sing new stuff.
Uh-huh.
But then we realized, you know what? No, nobody really wants new stuff. So we get a little new stuff and we sprinkle it into the set.
Uh-huh.
But honestly,
You don't have a deliberate agenda to say this is about the new songs.
No. Well, right.
And that's different than your average band.
But it also allows us to pick like the best old songs also. That we can kind of pick the greatest hits. We don't have any, but if we did, like these would be them.
We had hits.
Exactly.
Right.
So here's the thing I wanted to mention. There's this great, so in an interview someone was talking to Billy Joel about whether he gets sick of playing Piano Man every night. And he said, listen, a couple, they pay like $50 for a babysitter. They buy $100 tickets. They go out to like a $200 dinner. They come in here in their best clothes. They sit down front. All they want to hear is Piano Man. He said, and God damn it, that's what they're going to hear. Like, who am I not to play the song that these people want? And we definitely have felt that. Like, that's why we always take requests every night. Because we have a sense of people are going to request Lions, Baby, and Slide Girl, those 3 songs.
Yeah.
So we know we're going to play those. We don't have to wait for someone to ask.
Right.
But the rest of it, there are other songs that we're imposing on people a set list, and we feel like they should have some input. You know, what's that Spicoli line? I feel like this is our time.
Right.
You're here and I'm here. This is our time. Right. So it's from. What is that movie?
Fast Times.
Right. Not your time.
Yeah.
So we feel like the people should have some input. So we always take a certain number of requests. And if sometimes they go off the rails. Like last night, they kind of went off the rails. It's like we wouldn't have 2 songs that I play by myself in one concert. That just. But that, it's luck of the draw. You don't know what you're going to get.
You don't know what you're going to get.
If a kid's out there playing with a slinky, Michael's pretty sure what song they're going to ask for. But it's risky to take requests.
I was thinking there are many ways to be a band, and in many ways a band relates to the audience and the music they make. And I was just trying to think of some examples in my head in order to sort of differentiate Lost and Found with these other possible things. And so one example I thought of was there's the kind of band where the concert is the point of it all. And that's a band like maybe the Grateful Dead is a band like that, where the whole reason for the album is just a souvenir or it's something to drive you to go see them. But the reason the Dead is awesome is because you're at the show and they're jamming for 20 minutes on one song. And
if that's awesome to you.
If that's awesome to you, right. Or Fish, or like a band like that for those kind of bands, the point of it is the concert. Then there's a band like Steely Dan, where the record is the point.
Right.
And no one reminisces about how fun it is to go to a Steely Dan concert, because they don't play that much, and they never did, even when they were
They probably yell at you.
Yeah, right.
Quiet.
And it's not even so much about the songs. Like the Dead is like that too, where it's not even so much about the songs, but for Steely Dan, it's that record. the recording itself is the thing that makes it extraordinarily awesome.
Levels of compression.
Yeah, and just like sweet hi-hat Steve Gadd playing the drums or whoever it is, And then there are bands where the song is the thing, and the recording doesn't matter too much, and the show doesn't. And like Bob Dylan might be an artist like that, where
and a lot of country music.
Oh yeah,
Like
exactly.
earlier country music.
Sure,
Yeah, right.
that's a perfect example where like maybe even the recording is actually sort of bad, and the concert, like if you go see Dylan nowadays, right? Like everybody just leaves confused, So, but really, it's like and Dylan is really on my mind because I'm thinking of his song called "To Make You Feel My Love," which is actually a new Dylan song from the '90s. It was on Time Out of Mind record, which is a good Dylan record, I think. But then it's been covered; it's become a standard, and Adele recorded it on her huge record like 3 years ago or whatever. And so now the whole world knows that song is an Adele song, but it's a Dylan song. And I learned it from a Joan Osborne record, and Billy Joel has recorded it. And it's a beautiful song. It's absolutely timeless. And it's because Bob Dylan he can write songs that are timeless.
Right.
That transcend the recording and transcend the concert. But you guys have Lost and Found is different than all of those, in my opinion. Or I was just trying to figure out what it is, because it's not about I don't think it's about the album so much. It's almost like it's even more experiential than the concert.
Like there's a fourth piece you're leaving out.
Tell me about this.
And I think it is relationships, essentially. Interaction with people. So not like from the stage interaction.
Right.
Which is sort of like fake for people. I mean, not for us, but I mean for most bands. Like, how you doing, Minneapolis? Right. Like Kiss is like top notch at that, right? Right. And when I went to see Kiss, Paul Stanley had on the floor a white piece of paper with like the details, like, Toledo, the first time they were there was whatever. So he's like, how you doing, Toledo? He's like, the first time we played here was at the Valentine Theater. So I mean, it's interaction, but it's not really, right. So anyway, so we have genuine interaction during the concert, like we're having a conversation, but we're also absolutely accessible before, during, and after the concert. So selling's not the right word, but part of what we're selling is us. Yeah. We're part of the package, right?
Right.
So you have like a song, you have like a recording, you have a concert experience, and you have the two of us.
Yeah.
And the two of us interacting. Like some people, their favorite part is when we are talking to each other.
Sure.
And
the banter?
Yeah, exactly. Like whether that's before, during, or after. So
yeah.
I would say it's all of those things, but it's more like, it's a fourth of each one of them kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think I remember I was just seeing on Instagram, Richard Buxford Culligan went to see you guys at Luther College like a week ago or something. Mm-hmm. And he posted on Instagram, and the caption underneath was something like "Lost and Found, the theology rock spectacle," and I thought that's pretty close, because it's beyond. Well, and here's the thing, that as someone who knows you guys personally, and then I also can step back and experience it as a musician, and then I can experience it just as a fan or as someone sitting in the audience. And sometimes I feel myself getting frustrated because I think the songs themselves are totally worth the attention. And then I find myself, when anybody who's a musician sees you play, they're going to realize, holy cow, these guys just rock. Chops. Musically, just instrumentally, in harmonies and arrangements, the musical stuff is totally great. And so I feel a little bit miffed that I wish you would get more credit for the songs and for the musicianship, because the spectacle is so fun and so powerful and so entertaining that I think it overshadows just the core goodness of the tunes themselves.
That's interesting.
That is interesting.
Wow.
I agree with George, though, that the relationship is the key piece of it. And over the years we've had people advise us to be less accessible in order to become more I don't know, like
sought after,
famous,
right?
or something.
Successful?
Yeah.
more successful.
Yeah.
So we talk to bands all the time. We say their band consultant said, "Don't be seen before the show."
It's Tom Jackson from Nashville.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the guy who does those seminars.
Yeah, so it's like, make sure nobody sees you before the show. So when you come out, there's a big woo,
yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
But friends are not like that. You know what I mean? And we truly, even we were talking about our website earlier when we first came up with a website and, 20 years ago, we talked to the developers and they had set up a thing for fans. Then we said, let's change that and make it listeners or friends. Because we've never seen it that way. We've never seen it as put the spotlights on us because we're the band.
Yeah.
And we always tell the venue hosts, we're like, leave the lights on the people. Make sure you leave the house lights on.
Yeah.
And they think we're joking. They truly think we're joking.
Right.
And they'll turn all the house lights on and go, oh, you mean like this? We're like, yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
And they truly think we're joking. And it does come down to the relationship side of it. And what happens is people have a nice time. They have a funny time when we're joking around.
Yeah.
And so then what happens is they see us in that context, maybe at, say, a large gathering or something like that. Then when they hire us, they want to replicate that. And so they put us on, they almost use us as the rodeo clowns. So they say, here I'm going to put Lost and Found in between the real bands.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to have them MC this thing.
Right.
Or you guys play while people are coming into the room.
Yeah.
And what they miss is that they had a good time because they were listening. So when they saw us, we were in the middle of the program, almost like a speaker is introduced. And then they listened to everything, and they thought, oh, that was funny. Oh, that song, was that I liked that song for whatever reason. And then they laugh and they enjoy it. And then when they hire us for another thing, they put us on like the rodeo clowns. And we don't have anything that fits that.
Right.
Because if we don't have the people's attention, it doesn't work.
Right, because you've built trust with that audience in your when you're in control of your own concerts.
Yes.
You can build. There's community happening.
Yeah,
There's an intimacy that everybody can feel, that feels so nice, and that we can all be our true selves in that moment with these songs. And that's why it's so special to see you guys play a show. Yeah, and if you get thrown up at a festival for 10 minutes and you haven't built that trust.
Right. Yeah, we're not, Frisbee playing music, essentially, right? Like,
right.
Yeah, like...
I mean, you can't throw the big beach ball out there.
It's funny because we have this one song that's sort of like our sort of like, smackdown response to that kind of thing, which is like, it's a jam song, but it's in E flat. So Michael plays like, these chords on E flat, and when you're in the key of E flat on the piano, you can just hit any black note.
Every flat.
And it all
E
works.
flat is every
so
flat.
I'm just slamming, not doing anything. But it sounds like I'm playing solos, and we can play this for an hour. It just goes forever, and we're like, okay, that's what you want.
Since nobody's listening, what's the point?
Why don't you guys just wash your cars? We'll be up here.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Your audience awareness, how has that evolved in the time that you've toured and traveled? And I think that's one of the most exciting things to watch, knowing a lot of people that perform and just what it's like to have an audience, I don't know, in the palm of your hand, wrapped around your finger, whatever.
Do you mean
analogy.
like the audience as in like our listeners
in a live
big group?
in a live performance, and there's so much about the timing and just when you're taking the breath and you're looking around, and I don't know, I'm just interested in hearing you talk about that and how you gauge an audience, and maybe if you've had some near
experience with the audience?
Yeah,
okay.
your experience, and just maybe you can remember some really difficult audiences over the years. But I think that's like you were saying, you're sort of building this temporary community that's never going to gather again ever in its specific composition. And there's just so much about that you do make it look so easy because you're so skilled at it.
Well, our goal is that strangers would become friends. That everybody can kind of enjoy the experience and take a chance on enjoying it. What really sabotages it is when people don't give it a chance. When they say, oh, this is not for me anyway, so I'm going to chat. And they'll stand in the back and chat. And then they kind of miss it. And then they say, I don't know what people found so interesting about that concert. Of course, because they missed the whole thing. They were chatting during it, thinking it was just...
You got to get on the ride.
Yeah,
You can't watch the roller coaster from the street.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a difficult thing. We hope that people would become kind of friends. They come as strangers, they leave as friends. Mm-hmm. We also, we feel like any band can, through pyrotechnics and loud speakers and all kinds of fun stuff and guitar solos and piano solos, any band can make kids walk away and say that was a cool band. We would love for kids to walk away and say, we're cool kids, having been there with that band, and so one of the experiences we had that was really difficult, we were playing at a high school auditorium, and it was the kind of thing where, stage was in front, and then there were two sort of wings. The room was shaped like a V, and we were at the bottom of the V. And so all the people on one side of the room were separated from the people on the other side of the room by kind of this big V-shaped wall in which the school had like its technical stuff, like a soundboard and all kinds of things. So the people on one side of the room couldn't see the people on the other side of the room. And it made it almost impossible for us to play a concert.
Yeah.
Because if we say to someone, hey, girl in the green hair, what's your name? Uh-huh. But if the other people can't see that person, they can never build that relationship with each other. Yeah. And they have no idea what happened or what was interesting or that kind of thing.
Yeah. One thing I heard you guys say years ago, and this was during a private conversation. That's not like something you'd say on the stage, but I think about it all the time. And I'll just tell you what it was. You told me about 3 M's, and you'll have to correct me if you want me to be more specific. But I think the 3 M's were message and music and money.
Yeah,
And I think this is true really for any creative person, regardless of your genre, but it's especially true for a band like you guys. And so you have those 3 things to be concerned about: the message and the music and the money. And there are numerous ways you can prioritize those 3 things as far as which one's the most important and which is the thing you're going to,
Right.
And if I remember correctly, you told me that the order you put them in had music on the bottom.
Yes.
And message on the top, and money in the middle.
That's about right.
And I thought that was really helpful, a really clear and helpful way to describe your motivation as a band that's out there playing concerts and making records and selling stuff. And I thought it was great that you actually took the time to think about these things and make this hierarchy, and I'm not sure that there's not a wrong way to prioritize those 3.
No.
Right? So no matter who you are in the arts, you can prioritize like money as the most important thing. If you have you got to pay your rent,
right,
and you have to feed your baby or whatever,
right,
or you could be all about the music or the art and make that the high priority and have money be at the bottom.
Right.
So any of those choices
are that won't make it.
But any of those choices are legit.
That's right.
Any of those choices are legit, though.
Oh yeah.
Right. But the fact that you guys you've put them in an order deliberately, and you were so clear about it, I thought was really great. And so I would challenge any listener who's making art to think about that. If you have the 3 M's, your message and your money and your music, or whatever your medium is, your medium.
Oh, now we're getting there.
Think about that, and how are you going to prioritize those, and let your values determine the decisions you make. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah,
and
certainly.
Talk about why you hierarchied them in the way you did.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that we got a first and second too, because the way we've usually have thought of it, and maybe at that time we thought of it with all 3, but the way we usually say it is there's the music, the message, and the money, and the least of these is the music. Like that's the one we could give or take. It's fun. It's what. It obviously is an important part because we wouldn't have the other 2 without it, right?
Sure.
I mean, you can't say it doesn't matter.
Right.
I mean, it's definitely there and it serves its function. For us personally, it's just at the bottom of the list. So if we had to give up one of the 3 things, it would be the music.
Yeah.
Right. Because we still have, this message we have, which is essentially the unconditional love of God for everybody, no matter what. That's like our message, and we will carry that to our graves. And money, I mean, you have to make money to live, right? The thing that's disposable for us of the 3 things is music, because we could do something else. In fact, we're about to. We're both going to go do something else.
Yeah.
We'll still have the message And the
Hopefully.
money, hopefully, right? We'll still have the message for sure, and hopefully the money. But the music, like, it's a thing we did,
Right.
but it's not. It doesn't define who we are going forward,
Right.
I mean, we take it with us, but it's not. It's not. It's the least important thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you ever feel pressure from the art community and artists in general, and maybe artists who you respect, in musicians who influenced you, to put music higher on the hierarchy?
It depends. That depends kind of on how experienced, old, I guess for shorthand, the musician is. If the musician is younger, they put a lot more pressure on us to
Work on those chops.
work on the,
Right.
to be more, to emphasize the music more.
Yeah.
As people get older and they become more like our age and they're seasoned and people have been playing in bands for 20 and 30 years,
Right.
kind of thing, they all say, oh, lost and found. Yeah. I mean, if I did it again, that's how I would do it. Or they appreciate more the way we've chosen to have this career. Just because they know what really matters, kind of thing. So, for instance, like if I go to my music store in Los Angeles, which works with, I could run into any one of any one of the most famous and well-known singers and songwriters in the world in this store any day of the week.
Yep.
Those guys in that store, they consider Lost and Found to be truly a success story. Because we've been able to keep going.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason is that we didn't say it's just about the art.
Yeah.
The art wasn't first.
Uh-huh.
Now, there are certainly
This is stuff that makes people angry. There are probably listeners to this podcast who are going to hear you say that and get angry.
Yeah, sure. And in the sense that it's just like you said, there's no right way to prioritize them.
Right.
All of the priority choices are legitimate.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And emphasizing your art is, of course, a great way to, be successful. The better art you create, there's a possibility that it'll really get known or it'll bring you some satisfaction.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. It depends on what your end goal is.
Yeah.
At some point, though, there are people who are doing great art or music in this case, but they're not doing it for a living anymore because they wanted the music to be great, but they didn't think of a way to monetize it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and then you also, like, I'm reminded of, like, people we know who could play circles around us, but, they're working at, Office Depot, or whatever. Like, that, my wife and I were at this church in Europe recently, and we went to the Chopin concert. And it's this guy playing Chopin, but not like, wimpy Chopin like I play, like the really hard stuff. Like, it sounded like 3 or 4 people playing the piano at once. And I was like, that guy's amazing. But you know what? I know for a fact he's like working an office job, and he comes over here on Wednesday nights and plays these concerts. Like all of that investment in that talent doesn't make a living for him.
Yeah.
And so all of these albums that have session players on them, like even our most recent one, like, you pay those guys X amount of money, not enough to make a living, and they lay down their tracks, which are killer tracks, and then they walk away.
Yeah. And
they have to get a job somewhere else to make a living, even though they're like the best guitar player we've ever met. You know what I mean? It's like there's some, which is a little different than art, I understand. Like, that creating something is not necessarily the same as being technically top notch on your instrument. But there's a limited payback for the time invested in that if you do it to ignore the business side of what you do. If you're not booking gigs, but you're in your room playing guitar all day, you'll be a great guitar player, but you're not going to have any gigs because you forgot to book those.
And the reason for having the gigs, the reason for being a full-time musician as opposed to a part-time musician is that you're able to take gigs. Right, so it's like if you can make a living at music, then you can, make a living at music. If you're just making $200 playing a Wednesday night coffee house, that's not sustainable. So then when someone calls you and says, "Hey, can you do the Thursday thing? It's 200 miles from here," you have to say no because you have a job. So the only way you can take gigs is if music is your only income. You just can't. You can't have a job and be a musician at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you get any really good advice early in your career to sort of help you formalize that and make those explicit? Or did you kind of figure?
It was more like we stumbled into it, and we go
Okay.
back to the bike trip here again. That
Okay.
we were both 22 at the time. We were not married. We didn't have kids. We had no commitments, no houses, no cars, no nothing. We were at a spot in our lives where we could just get on a bicycle and ride out of town. And so we were right both at a spot where we were uniquely poised to make this leap. And we did it in such a way that it didn't take much money. I mean, this is all hindsight. Like, we didn't know it at the time, right? We were going to do this for a year and then go on with our lives. And so going on the bike trip like that, it's very cheap. All we needed was, we stayed with people mostly, like 300 nights we stayed with people, 40 nights in hotels. And so people supplied the food for the most part. Like, we needed bananas and Gatorade, in a day, right? And that's, you don't need much money, And so we had to start that way, which was like a national PR campaign in hindsight.
Yeah.
So we know 25 people in every tiny little town 80 miles away from each other, all around the perimeter of the United States.
Yeah.
And we had no idea that was going to pay off the way it did.
Yeah.
So then when those people get together in their groups of people, which is, what you and I used to think of as youth gatherings, which, there are very few of them now, but they would have like a local youth gathering, and they would bring us in because somebody in that committee knew us. And then those people would go back, and then they'd invite us to a church, and it just kept going like that. So we never had to face a spot of like, do I quit my day job to become a full-time musician? Yeah, and that's, I think, what most people are stuck in that world. Because if you don't hit it with just the right moment, you're going to stumble.
Yeah.
I mean, not fail. I mean, it's still, you could do it again another time.
Yeah.
But that's the hardest thing. Just what Michael was saying. Like, in order to be a full-time musician, you have to be a full-time musician.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is it's so interesting to hear. I hope you listeners are. Isn't this just so? This is so practical. I just get so excited about the practical nature of this conversation. But I'm thinking of how like you guys emerged as a national act immediately.
Yeah.
And that's
at a small level.
That's the same. That's the same exact thing that I did. And you have been playing for 30 years, and I'm having my 25th anniversary, and it's, that is the opposite advice that people will tell you when you go to a musician conference. Because here's what they'll say at a musician conference. If you're playing like in the rock and roll world, they'll say, well, what you want to do is do concentric circles. So you want to play in your city and like sell out the venue in your town. And then you want to go a 100-mile radius and play the cities within a 100-mile radius until you can sell out the venues in that town. And then you want to go to the 300-mile radius, you know what I mean? And then if you keep selling out the venues in the concentric circles, then you're a real band. But in reality, my experience is you can't play in your hometown once a month. That's way too much.
Yes.
Right.
That's like ridiculous.
Yep.
And
it makes much more sense to play for venues that seat 50 or 100 people in 50 or 100 cities.
Exactly. And so my experience was I've never been a local artist. In fact, I live in Minneapolis, and I can't play here because no one knows who I am here. But I can play all over the country all the time, and I have for 25 years because I just found it's way easier to like you're saying, to drive in 80 or 100 mile stretches between mid-sized metro areas. And then you can be like the dramatic person from some distant state who's on a tour. It's like way cooler. It's way more.
We all are engaged in the small version of what Kiss did. Like when they first got started, I'm talking about Kiss all the time. I don't even listen to them. But so like at the time they started, all these bands were selling out huge arena things, and like in the biggest cities. And Kiss like caught on to the idea of like, there's an arena in Toledo that holds 5,000. There's an arena in Des Moines. There's like all of these smaller towns instead of New York City and Miami, and like they went for those mid-sized working class towns all over the Midwest, and Kiss became huge because of that.
Yeah,
and like. Then they, later they could come back and do a stadium. But even then, even at their peak, which was a long time ago, but they still weren't a huge stadium band. They were a bunch of little arena bands, and you could make a good living smaller venue over
Yep.
and over. It's the Amanda Palmer thing that it's like
Exactly.
you just need enough to get by.
Yeah.
And if you're happy getting by instead of being rich and famous, you can make a living with 10,000 listeners.
Yeah, and if you're a full-time musician and you want to be full-time, you have to make X amount of dollars per night. I find if, let's say you want to at least walk away every night with $300, if you try to stay in your town or even if you're in a city
right.
and you want to play a lot for no one's going to pay you $300 to play once a week. No. Very rarely. I mean, maybe in the 90s before the economy tanked, you could do that if you had a residency or something. But that's 1 in 100 acts that could swing that.
Right.
But if your possibilities are the entire North American 48 states, the contiguous 48 states, there's a lot of $300 checks sitting there.
Yep.
And if you come waltzing in from some other state as a nationally touring artist, they're going to be like, wow, that's cool. It's absolutely, here's your $300.
Yeah, and there's an aspect of even that, of well, the phrase we use is don't take away my blessing, which is some people want to give you something. And for you to say, no. I mean, they want to be blessed by giving you this thing, which is also the Amanda Palmer thing. Take the money.
Right.
That TED Talk thing.
Right? Totally.
Yeah, in some town right now, there's a person with a lot of money who'd be very happy to give $300 of it to Jonathan Runman to come and play in that.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's there's no shame in that.
No.
Right. And there's no reason not to do that.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So that's one option. Another is $30, $10 tickets, and there's a way to get whatever the number is.
Sure,
there's a way to do it without
yeah.
relying on any of the structure out there that everyone thinks is necessary.
That's right. And even if apart from someone out there wants to pay, it's not even that they want to pay Jonathan, me specifically. They just want to have a band or a songwriter come and play a concert, and they don't even particularly care that it's me. And the thing that I've said in my own mind for decades is somebody has to do it. Why not me?
Yeah,
I'm available.
Right.
I want to play. They want someone to come and play.
Right.
Why not me? Someone's got to do it.
The words of the Judds. Why not me?
Yeah.
I used to play in a country band.
So all the Judds material. Oh man, I think this is just so tons of helpful stuff here. There's so many things we could talk about.
I was going to say, it's been low on the creativity side, but you're getting the practical podcast.
What would you guys are wrapping up a tour. You're not going to get a chance to do these kinds of interviews as much as you did maybe before. What do you want to leave people who are creatives? Do you have words of encouragement or wisdom?
Over the years, people have said in a way that's intended to be critical. They've sat in the audience and they've looked at us and they've said, Psh, I could do that. Mm-hmm. Our answer is, yeah, exactly. You could do that. I guess if someone took something away from Lost and Found, I hope it would be that they would say, heck, if those guys can make a living for 29 years playing concerts from town to town around the United States and throughout the world, I could do that. Or I could make a living with, the napkins I embroider, or the cut and paste greeting cards that I make, or the music I play, or the dance that I do. And I hope people would see it that way, as opposed to thinking of it as like, psh, who let those guys in here? Yeah. Instead, they would be inspired. They'd think, man, I saw this band. Those guys could barely sing, and they had to spend half the concert telling jokes. I could do that. Great. That's what that would be a great thing if people would walk away with that.
Yeah, and I would add to that that the internet is the bike trip that's available for everybody. I mean, because what made me think of it is you're embroidery on napkins or whatever, like Etsy, for example, right? And there are many music sites that have the same thing. But the idea is you can have an amazing reach without leaving your house. You don't have to get on a bicycle and ride around the perimeter of the United States. If there's a market for what you're doing, if there's an appreciation for your creative thing you do, you can get that to the people. I just think it's an amazing opportunity. It's very hard for the dinosaurs to get into that internet world, because our whole model was based on selling a vinyl album, cassette, CD to an individual in person after a show. Like that's how we really made our money when we were making really good money. But that model's way gone. Most young people don't have CD players. I mean, you can't even do that, right? So you have to work in a whole different way for your art to survive. And your art surviving is back to those three things again, right? Like the three principles of message and music and money, that or medium and money, that you want your art to survive. And part of making your art survive is making a living at it and getting it out there, and like the commercial side of it, right?
Feeding it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Don't ignore it, right? Don't lock it in a closet, right? Take it out for a walk, right? The people have to hear it in order to appreciate it and give you money so you can make more. You look at the long history of art and how many things are commissioned over the course of humanity. That like some wealthy patron or pope or whatever says, paint this and I shall pay you. And the person goes and does it, right? Like, we're moving more toward that, I think, as a society. And Kickstarter is a great example of that.
Yeah.
That you're asking people to patronize you in the best way, right?
Yeah.
that it comes directly from the people who want the thing you're doing into your hands so you can do the thing you want to do.
Yeah.
And that's a great example of how the internet allows your art to continue, is that it finds the people who are most apt to pay you to do it. And then you have to be willing to take the money so that you can make more.
Yeah. And you guys had a very, very moving and surprising crowdfunding adventure a few years ago. Do you, and from just observing as someone, as a crowdfunding participant of your project and watching it unfold on Facebook, it seemed like you were even surprised at how the flood of support you got.
Yeah. We did 2 Kickstarters. The first one we did was when Michael he wasn't able to tour for a while for health reasons, and that was the first Kickstarter we did. That it was a way to carry us through a year, so that we could continue when that year was over.
Yeah.
And you know it as a musician as well, that if you were the sole source of income in your family, if you took a year off, the whole thing would shrivel up, and you'd have to do something else, and you lost all the momentum you had,
sure,
and all that. So that was the whole idea of that. We had these recordings from live shows in the can. We had just recorded them when he got the diagnosis. And then it was like, well, the way to get in front of this is to offer people the opportunity to carry us through a year. And it's not like people were donating. I mean, they were getting something. They're buying stuff, right? But that, and we needed whatever we thought, like, $20,000 or something. We got like 60 something.
It was so way over anything you ever expected.
Way beyond, which was, a testimony to a lot of things.
People our listeners are like our friends.
Right.
Yeah.
And that they value what we do, and that they cared about us as people. I mean, there's a lot in that, right?
Did that experience and just that validation from all these years and from all those people help you decide to retire?
No, that was when we were still thinking we'll just keep doing this, and it did get us through that period of time, and we then picked up and just carried on. The decision to retire was like a few things coming together at once, and one is, it's, as you know, it's relatively hard to book a gig now. I mean, it's easier than it was 2 years ago, but it's not. The economy's not fully back, and the last thing people spend money on is entertainment, live entertainment. So like that's one thing. And the other thing is, like, we're both 52 now, and at some point we're gonna have to stop doing this and do something else. Easier to find a job at 52 than 62 or 72. Not a lot of 72s getting jobs, right? So like those things came together, and then also just it's tiring, like to travel for 29 years, like. The travel for the first half of that was exciting, and then like the midpoint got difficult, and now it's just like it's the worst part of everything we do is getting to the gig. And then once we're there, it's great, but until someone invents the teleporter, that it's just it's time to be done.
I think most performers never consciously are aware that they're retiring. But you guys made a conscious decision,
Yeah, that's
and
a
then
really
you
good point.
publicized it
Yeah.
and actually said, we're doing a farewell tour.
Well, you know, the
that
thing is,
almost never happens.
We always used to tell other bands, we'd say, when you decide to quit, and this all is prior to all this is just the deep understanding we have that eventually we'd have to stop.
Yeah.
Right.
That we wouldn't be singing these songs when we're 75 or 80.
Yep.
And then you just back it up from there. You say, well, would I want to be doing this at 70? I don't know. Would I want to be doing this at 60? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You know, and you just keep backing it up. But then you think, like George said, at what point can we move to another thing and still legitimately have another thing for
Yeah.
20, 25 years, have
Sure.
some other career, right?
Yeah.
So we always told bands, we said, when you quit,
Yeah.
don't tell anyone you're quitting, because then, like, as soon as people hear that you quit, they'll think, hey, we should invite those guys to play a concert. Oh, they quit. You know, you should just never tell people you're quitting, because then you'll never get anything. But we realized that we do want to quit. We do want to be done.
Yep.
And we couldn't just, in good conscience, suddenly not be playing. People would call us up and say, hey, guys, can you come to play a concert in Connecticut next year? Oh, I'm sorry, we don't do that anymore. And
Yeah.
people would say, you're kidding. And we'd say, no. So we just felt like it was,
It's almost a courtesy to your friends.
It is.
and we wanted to
Yeah.
have a chance to say thank you to everybody.
Right.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
see everybody one last time, say thanks for all your support for all these years.
Does
and
it
go
feel-
out on really good terms.
Going on good terms. Does it feel like a luxury to you that you
Oh, yeah.
get to do
It
this?
does.
Definitely. Because the other side of it is, like, at some point, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing, and we wouldn't notice that we're not able. You know what I mean? Like, you've seen bands that are like past their prime. You
Right.
think, like,
Ooh, yeah, it's hard to watch.
Even for the casino, this is pretty bad, right? So you feel like we would rather, take, essentially the Michael Jordan approach and just
Yeah.
say, like, we're playing great concerts. We feel great. We're having a good time. People still love the concerts. Now's the time.
Yeah.
Like now, just like, bow and walk away.
Yeah.
As opposed to dragging every time out of it till the people just wander away slowly. And only a few hangers on.
And the really nice thing about having this farewell tour is that it always seems like you remember a thing the way it last was.
Right.
You think about friends and relationships and experiences,
Yeah.
school or jobs or whatever they are. The last way it was is the way you remember
It's the
it.
recency effect.
The recency effect.
Yeah.
See, that's
Yeah.
some brain
Yeah.
science. Exactly. So you have this recency effect, and that's what we wanted to have with Lost and Found.
Yeah.
So we're gonna remember Lost and Found for our whole lives, like last night
Yeah.
in
Right.
Richfield,
Right.
And the night before in Dayton, Ohio, and Howell, Michigan,
Yeah.
and Lincoln, Nebraska,
Yeah.
and where we're having 700 people come to a show, and just like this really great experience. We wanted to remember it that way.
Yeah.
And we also wanted to finish the year feeling burned out. And feel like
You want to leave it all on the basketball court, or
Like,
whatever
the
they
last
say.
thing I want to do is go play a concert. Kind of
Yeah.
thing. I just want to feel like tired and exhausted and grateful for the chance to be off, as opposed to playing limping into it. We only played 6 times the year, and we wish we
Next year we play 5 times.
Yeah. When's our next gig?
Hey.
2 months.
Remember that gig they used to
already.
invite us to? They don't anymore. Great.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're being very deliberate about it, and it's so great.
You're controlling your message.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. And one of the things we learned from that Kickstarter that I was talking about earlier is that when something is going to become a rumor, you want to get in front of it instead of letting it leak out how it leaks out, because it always leaks out in a distorted, deformed way, right?
Yeah, the
And
telephone game.
Yeah, you get in front of it and you say, "This is what it is."
Right.
And so we felt the same way about this farewell tour, that we will carefully roll out the announcement. So we made a video.
Yeah.
We told a few people that we felt should be told in advance.
Yeah.
Our former managers, Pete
Yeah.
and Troy and,
Yeah.
and Justin. So people like that. And then we said, okay, now we have the video.
Yeah.
Here's the date we're going to announce it.
Yeah.
And then we're going to explain exactly what people can do. If you
Right.
want to come to a show or book a show, here are the dates.
Yeah.
January 1st to December 31st.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wow.
Right.
And
And,
then-
then we
Yeah.
see where it landed.
Right, and it's not like people say, I heard Lost and Found had to quit because they couldn't make a living at it.
Right,
Or I
right.
heard one of them was sick or something like that. This way, people can see that, heck, we could keep doing this.
Sure.
And we enjoy it, and people enjoy it,
Yeah.
and we're into it, but it's time for us to to take the decision to do a new thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so inspiring.
Did both of you come to that recognition kind of in discerning that at about the same time? Like, did you both say to each other at the same time, we've got to talk about this?
To quit for like 15 years.
But I just wanted him to quit. Right?
You go first.
I could get by on half the money. Right? I distinctly remember it in a van ride. Like a long van ride that we were just talking about, like, what do we do next year? Like, what does the future look like?
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, as we're sort of like, looking at doors closing essentially in front of us in the conversation of like, that, we don't know if that's going to happen. We don't know if that's going to happen. Like, we got to be sure that there's money to raise families, like, and all this stuff. And finally we realized, like, and part of this was we knew that there are people out there that we come to their town 4 times a year, like Chicago, Minneapolis, we're coming back to this town, right? I mean, like, so people would be like, they were lackluster about coming to see us or book us. And part of our thinking was, there are a lot of people out there who think someday I'm going to book Lost and Found. And once we said, this is our last year, they're like, oh, someday has arrived. And so we booked as much as we wanted to book this final year, which is great.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. It's tiring, but it's wonderful. Especially toward the end when everyone's finally like catching on that, there's only a few left.
Yeah.
So we're feeling like we feel really good about the decision. It was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
A lot of like, tangential things are getting harder, like weird things like the airlines and the way they treat you now.
Yeah.
And there's like a lot of other things that make traveling harder.
The mechanics of the music life is more annoying than ever.
Yeah. I mean, all sorts of things are harder.
Yeah.
And we feel like every time we run into one of those things, we're like, glad we're getting down now.
Yeah, when we say we're sort of giving up Lost and Found, what we're really giving up is touring for a living.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, we'll always be friends. We'll always be playing music together. We'll always have this catalog of songs.
Yep.
And it's just like we were saying before, you can't be a full-time musician unless you're a full-time musician. Mm-hmm. That's the part we're giving up.
Yep.
So we'll get jobs, and then if we get invited to play a gig, and it's kind of a special one-off gig, we would definitely entertain the notion of accepting it. And we probably would, contingent upon being able to get time off from our job.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you get back into that thing of, we're not full-time musician. We can't just go to Des Moines or something like that.
Yeah, but now it's not a career we're not taking. It's a career we've had.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when you're first starting out, you're like, well, I got to make this decision. You're like, what do I value more? And like, do I make the jump? And like, we already made the jump.
Yep.
And we're climbing back up the ladder.
Yeah.
So now we know, like, if it's a luxury, it's a luxury that we can pick up taking a gig for fun and profit, essentially. And if we can't, we can't. But it's not. Nobody's relying on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, this is a perfect transition because we have 2 more things we want to ask you, and I'll ask the first one. And it is, how do you want the listeners to this podcast to find you now that you're not going to be touring? Because obviously you have a legacy, you have a catalog of songs, you have recordings, you have the Germany thing. It's like a curated cultural immersion experience that you guys are going to do in a year or 2 in Europe. So how do you want people to still follow you and connect with you now that you're not on the road?
Well, we'll have our website.
Yeah, the website will still exist. We're going to migrate it to a different server because it doesn't need all this back-end functionality that it has that's designed in 1995 but works like an old car. It still works, right?
Yeah, and the website is speedwood.com, right?
So you think of it as like speed metal, but we don't have any metal because we're acoustic instruments, so it's Speedwood, one word, Speedwood. So that website will still be there, and there'll still be a store attached to it, the ability to buy things, listen to songs, download tracks.
Are your records on Spotify and iTunes? And
some of them are. We started with, probably about the time we started making CDs. Those are all available on Spotify and iTunes and stuff.
Yeah.
The newest one is not. At the end of this year, we'll probably put it, we'll go to CD Baby and hand them the things. And say, all right, now fine, let it go out. You know? But Spotify is one of the most ruinous things for a band.
Yeah.
They really are. And it's, that'll get me off on a half-hour rant. So let's not
we'll have you back to talk later about Spotify.
Exactly.
So how about social media? Is there always going to be Lost and Found Facebook and
yes, the
Twitter
Facebook
and
fan page kind of thing and all that. Yeah, that'll all still be there. It'll be less active because there's less going on. But things that are germane to people who listen to our music, And I do all of that as it's sort of just my opinion whether I want to post something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If I find something funny that seems appropriate for our listeners, I'll post it. Right.
Well, we'll cross-link all those things when we post this
That's right.
on
And then
this
the
show on
Luther
social
500
media.
Festival.
Oh yeah, and then do you want to say anything about that?
You're better at this one.
Yeah, so every 2 years we host this cultural immersion experience in Germany. It's called the Luther 500, and it's kind of an observation of the 500th anniversary of events surrounding the Reformation. And in 2017 it'll be the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther nailing the 95 Theses to the castle church door. It's a week-long program. It's kind of like it's like family camp in Germany. And so all ages, all super fun. It's
You guys play some concerts. Other artists play some concerts.
A little bit of music. There's a little bit of music at it, but it's mostly just it's culture and it's history and it's sightseeing. It's European vacation. There's some servant project opportunities, that kind of stuff. And we always bring a few musicians to provide music at things like morning and evening prayer. We had a concert, I think in 2011, maybe in 2013, but we ultimately realized that like people don't come from the United States to Germany to hear a concert they could hear in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
They come to Germany because they want to do stuff they can only do in Germany.
Right.
And so the musicians just kind of like, the program is sprinkled with music because we think it's good community building. But it's a great experience, and certainly we encourage everyone to check out the website and come to Germany. Bring your family.
Excellent.
Cool. Well, my question to both of you is, what would you tell your kindergarten self?
Whew. Honestly, it'd be something like, the kids who scare you don't matter. I spent so much time all through school worrying about like the bullies, and we grew up in a blue collar town with mafia past, and that the bullies, had backing, you know what I mean? Like they were really dangerous, but that, okay, well, here's what it is. Like when people say to kids, high school, you should enjoy these because these are the best years of your life. Like I can't imagine anything more depressing to tell a kid, because if that were the case for me, if I really believed that was true, I would have been dead before I was out of high school. Because if it could get worse than that, if it's all downhill after that, right? So my point is just even from a very early age, the people I thought were important and scary were neither. Yeah.
Huh. Excellent. Michael.
It's a tough question in a way because like I have a daughter in kindergarten right now, so I'm influenced by thinking like what could a kindergartner understand, but assuming that it would be advice to give to my kindergarten self and I would understand it and do it, or even if I didn't understand I would actually do it, it would be to take advantage of time. Time is certainly by far the most precious commodity we have, far beyond money or anything like that. And when you're young, you have lots of time, both in terms of how many years you have left, but how many hours you have in a day. So if a grade school student comes to mom and dad and says, I'd just like to spend 4 hours reading, followed by 4 hours of playing my musical instrument, you would say, awesome. But as a young person, you just don't know that time is precious. Then the moment will come in your life where you don't have time to do the things you'd love to do. And I do think it gets to this creative side of things, that you create things when you're young because you have time. And it's hard to create when you don't have not only physical space, but also time in terms of space and opportunity. And so, I guess that's the thing that's most easily missed when you're young, is that that time is really precious and super available when you're young, and increasingly less available as time passes.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you guys for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Congratulations on a career well lived.
Thanks.
Thank you. Feel like we should have a glass of port.
Yeah.
And thank you, listeners, for listening. And we will see you later. Goodbye.
Creativity.